Hello and good afternoon. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today for our event Unlocking the Economic Potential of Qatar's Creative Culture Industries here at M7. I would like to invite first His Excellency, the Ambassador of the European Union to the State of Qatar, Dr. Christian Tudor, to deliver a very quick opening remark. Thank you.
Good evening. Masal khair. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is an honor to welcome you today for a compelling discussion on unlocking the economic potential of Qatar's cultural and creative industries, CCIs, guided by the expertise of Dr. Tom Fleming. Today, not only we celebrate Qatar's artistic spirit, but explore the vast economic prospects that reside within these diverse and dynamic sectors. Before we dive into this exciting topic, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to our invaluable partner, M7. Their unwavering dedication to nurturing creativity and innovation has been instrumental in making this event a success. Reflecting on the topic at hand, the CCIs in Qatar, it is crucial to acknowledge their remarkable progress and their journey of growth and transformation from the realms of visual arts, design, and fashion to the captivating worlds of film, music, and technology. The creative landscape in Qatar is on the path to flourish. However, it is important not to address CCIs as mere expressions of art. They are crucial catalysts for economic development and societal change. These industries make substantial contribution to Qatar's GDP, generate employment, and they serve as centers of innovation. Furthermore, they possess the potential to diversify Qatar's economy, gradually reducing its reliance on traditional sectors and positioning the nation as a global nexus of creativity and culture in a manner that is multicultural and inclusive to all the communities which currently reside in Doha. This would allow us to embrace the distinctive character of Qatar, to celebrate its history and traditions and remain authentic to its heritage, while being cosmopolitan and welcome influences from beyond its borders. Moving forward, we must direct our attention to how to further unlock this potential and set the CCIs of Qatar on a path to success, which can be achieved through a variety of interconnected strategies. Investing in local talent is at the core of this vision, and we can already identify that within the younger generations of the Qatari society, there is a great pool of creative talents. To bolster the creative workforce, education and skill development programs must persistently be invested in. Nurturing emerging talent and providing mentorship opportunities are the cornerstones for realizing potential. Our event today is a step in this direction, as we have invited Dr. Fleming to identify the best way forward in collaboration with our local partners. Investing in emerging talent also entails investing in innovation and infrastructure. Hubs such as creative spaces, co-working facilities, and innovation centers where these talents can further develop. In this respect, our partnership with M7 is fundamental for our public diplomacy and for our bilateral EU-Qatar relations, in the process of enabling an ecosystem that promotes experimentation and collaboration while providing the necessary resources and assistance for artists and entrepreneurs to flourish. Innovation means also that we seek ways to be in the forefront of creativity beyond the traditional sectors and embrace enthusiastically virtual reality to blockchain and artificial intelligence. However, we need to remain mindful that this sector, as many others, face a lot of challenges at their early stages, and this is why we're also gathering here today, to mark these challenges and to address them. A major issue globally faced by CCIs is the protection of the intellectual work through comprehensive agreements or intellectual property protection and access to funding for new and young CCI entrepreneurs and the infrastructure development. I dare to say that from our viewpoint on these issues, Qatar is better placed than many of its neighbors, but there is always room for improvement and for optimization of the available resources through collaborations both regionally and of course with your European partners. This mentioned collaboration is essential to the creative process, and looking beyond its borders, I urge Qatar to actively seek partnerships with European organizations, artists and institutions. Through joint initiatives, cultural exchanges and international exhibitions, Qatar's CCIs can ascend to global prominence, enriching its creative domain. Collaboration also means facilitating access to international markets in both directions, from Qatar to Europe and vice versa. By liberalizing the market, export promotion initiatives, and participating in international creative events, Qatari artists and enterprises can share their creations with a global audience. Central to these initiatives in the rapidly evolving creative landscape is embracing technology as a harbinger of change. However, it is equally important to emphasize that as modernity is embraced, preserving Qatar's cultural heritage and finding a harmonious balance between tradition and innovation will set its CCIs apart on global stage. Overall, the cultural and creative industries of Qatar are poised for greatness. They have already left their mark not only on economic development, but by shaping the nation's identity, fostering inclusivity, and inspiring the world with boundless creativity. Once again, our thanks go to M7 for their invaluable assistance in organizing this discussion. I very much look forward to the insights from our esteemed panelists and the discussion that lie ahead. Together, let us embark on this journey toward a more vibrant, creative, and economically prosperous Qatar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now I'd like to kindly ask Mrs. Aldana Khaled Al-Misnad, Business Development Coordinator at Musharrif Cultural Forum, M7, to also deliver welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, Your Excellencies. Thank you for joining us at M7 tonight for what we hope will be a very insightful panel on unlocking the economic potential of Qatar's creative and cultural industries. At M7, we seek to support and empower our creative entrepreneurs to establish and grow their business by giving them mentorship, incubation opportunities, and a platform. None of this would be possible without our local and international partners. And we're very delighted to launch our partnership with the European Union today by hosting this panel at our learning space, a space for creatives to design, innovate, and learn. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the panel. Thank you.
And now is a time to invite Dr. Tom Fleming to the floor for his presentation. Dr. Tom Fleming is director of the Tom Fleming Creative Consultancy, developing strategies and policies on creative industries. He works all over the world, and we are honored to have him here with us today, coming from Porto, especially for this event, while tomorrow early morning he's already flying to Oslo to continue his work and presentations in the field. Please.
Thank you very much for the wonderfully warm and generous introduction to this evening's session. It's very difficult in some ways to follow that introduction because it set the scene so eloquently. Thank you very much. Ambassador, you really helped to create the framework for the discussion today and to talk about the real opportunity there is in Qatar to develop the creative economy through collaboration and engagement both within the country and internationally. I want to thank the EU delegation for hosting us this evening and bringing me to Qatar. I want to thank M7 for hosting this event as well. What an incredible space. It's legendary in the global creative scene, and it's such a privilege to be able to come here and to talk to you and engage in this wonderful space, which is doing so much as a dynamic creative hub. And I want to thank all of you as well for coming along today to have a discussion which I hope will be one of many where we can explore and co-create, co-design the value proposition for Qatar as a creative nation. As was mentioned in the introduction, my work takes me all over the world. I'm very lucky. And every country in its own way is seeking a pathway that explores its cultural and creative potential. So that raises the stakes, but also, I think, reinforces the importance of the creative economy as a way of diversifying the economy, a way of providing inspirational opportunities for talent, a way of adding value to and driving competitiveness and supporting innovation. And brutally, culture is who we are as human beings. So actually, getting down to basics, if we don't have a thriving cultural sector, cultural scene, then what are we as a society? So I'm going to talk about some of those things this evening, and I'm going to set it up for the panel, which I'm really excited about, because we've got some eminent creative entrepreneurs who will, I'm sure, be able to share so much knowledge and critically be able to help us to envision what is possible in Qatar in the creative economy. So just a little bit more about myself as a way of contextualizing this conversation. So we develop strategy, policy, and insight for the creative economy all over the world. We work from the macro level with institutions like UNESCO, European Commission, through to governments, institutions, municipalities, always asking the question, what is the value proposition for culture in this territory, in this context? What is the strategic opportunity? And this involves collaborative research and partnership. And it involves benchmarking. And like in anything, in our identity, we define ourselves as much as who we are, as much as who we see ourselves in relation to. So when we think about the Qatari creative economy, we don't just think about our relative strengths, we think about what other countries are doing. So we've been working with the Ministry of Culture and Youth in the UAE to look at their education institutions. To what extent are they fit for purpose in driving the creative economy going forward, which benchmarks, interestingly, with Qatar. We've developed a creative economy roadmap in Kuwait with a very strong focus on cultural heritage at its heart and key sectors like literature. In Southeast Asia, we've been working over many years in Malaysia. We developed the first ever creative economy blueprint there and have been working at a both macro level and a micro level. Just 3 weeks ago, I was in Kuala Lumpur to support the development of a creative district in the old downtown of KL, which is interesting in the context of where we are in this part of Doha. We have been working in Egypt on several occasions, but most recently to develop a framework for the creative economy for Egypt. And obviously such a cultural superpower in the MENA region with so much talent and heritage. And what they do in Egypt obviously has consequences for Qatar and obviously vice versa. And in Europe, not just in the European Union, but also in other countries, we've been developing a lot of research and strategy and insight, including looking at the ROIs, the returns on investment for dedicated approaches to finance and investment in the creative economy. Looking at cities in Asia, looking at investment in the UK. And we're also looking at what's happening next. So Qatar, here we are at this meeting point, this intersection of where the global economy is going in the global south. Looking at the population change in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia and South Asia. Looking at how this country can become a point of transaction, a platform for collaboration, and a meaningful interstices between different parts of the world. So we're working at the moment to understand how the creative economy is shaping up in sub-Saharan Africa on a macro pan-sub-Saharan African program. And we work to get to the basics. So who drives the creative economy wherever you go? Who are intrinsic to your success? It's your artists, it's your creative practitioners, it's your entrepreneurs. We mustn't forget those people and not just be thinking about the infrastructure, the buildings. It's about the people at the heart. And what brought me to Qatar was the work we've been doing with the EU delegation on a GCC level, looking at the opportunities for strategic collaboration, trade, and partnership between the EU and the GCC. We undertook a deep dive study over the last 12 months, which is focused on 4 countries in the first instance: Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. And now the 5th country, in many ways, in terms of asking some similar questions about the creative economy potential in Qatar. Some learning points that have come through, some takeaways that came through this piece of work that we undertook for the EU. One is something that I think you'll all appreciate, is the deficit of data, the need for data, the need for evidence, the need to provide the baseline, and the need to provide the kind of evidence that informs enterprises so they can develop and grow, but also informs policymakers and investors so they know where to start when it comes to investing in the creative economy. The importance of creative education and skills, the talent pathways, which I'll talk about a little bit later on as well. The importance of providing the enabling conditions for creative talent to flourish, the business support, the access to finance, the ongoing approach to skills and training, the IP support, protection and facilitation, which the Ambassador also mentioned earlier on. Yes, the importance of cultural infrastructure, brilliant museums, almost reimagining what museums can be, thinking them as open, connected, facilitators of creative expression, increasingly interdisciplinary. The importance of looking long-term and looking at impact and having a values and an ethical-based approach to the creative economy in relation to sustainable development. And an important consideration that policy doesn't just come from the top down. The best policy for informing sustainable development through the creative economy comes through partnership with civil society, with enterprise, and it comes through collaborations that happen locally, but also regionally and globally as well. The research that we undertook demonstrated huge scope for collaboration and trade across the creative economy within the GCC, between the GCC and the European Union, in terms of business-to-business networks, collaboration and exchange, showcasing, residencies, touring, trade shows and platforms, and critically, co-creation, co-design, research and development, finding those opportunities for mutual development, not just selling to one another, but actually innovating with one another. And the importance of culture and art at the heart of this, because the creative economy comes from our identities, from our heritage, from our stories. And it's about how we tell those stories into the future. But also, as the Ambassador mentioned, there are challenges here. On the one hand, we have the creative economy paradigm on the left here, a high-growth, fast-growing sector, resilient and adaptable, technology-driven, early adopters in many technologies, ultimately sustainable and renewable because it's about telling stories. You can never have enough stories. There's always going to be new cultural expressions. There's always going to be new content. You don't run out of creativity. Underpinned by art and culture, inspired by heritage. We're seeing much more sustainable, much more ethical approaches to the creative industries, kind of circular economy, people really thinking about the impact they have, both good and bad. And we're seeing this strange kind of geography now where people are at once born global. You have to be born global as a creative enterprise now, but you also need to be locally rooted, to be engaged in the communities you're in, to have that kind of agency. So what does that mean in terms of policy and practice? But we have these challenges, real fragility, and the COVID pandemic exposed the fragility even more than we already knew it was there. The dependence on micro-enterprise, the disproportionate amount of freelancers, or even people working in the kind of grey economy, the informal economy, that makes it hard to structure, to scale, to attract investment, to build a robust business model. Some people describe it as the gig economy. And yet, the paradox there is that market share in the creative industries is disproportionately driven by larger firms, aggregators, platforms, distributors that have the kind of monopoly on the power. They wield the influence when it comes to policy. But they depend on the talent, the micro enterprises. They're the kind of fuel for the creative economy. So we have this paradox of larger firms, a small number of larger firms and many, many micro firms. We have this challenge where many creative firms have scalability, but they don't have the tools, the evidence, the capacity, the support to reach their scale. But yet many actually don't want to scale. They want to remain boutique, but they're still important employers. They're still important innovators. And you put them all together, think about thousands of small creative enterprises. That's a critical underpinning for a diverse and high-value economy. There are challenges around IP, there are challenges around skills and updating skills. There are challenges around how we validate creative people with creative jobs, or people in school telling them that you can have a viable career in fashion, in gaming, in design. How do we tell that story and embed it within the education sector? And there are challenges all over the world about inclusive growth in the creative industries. How do we ensure that it's not just a privilege of certain people, but actually it's open for providing opportunities for everybody. This is a scary slide. I won't bore you with it. It just suggests some mega trends that are happening as well, whirring along, driving change in the creative economy, technological transformation, globalization, significant demographic change, whether we talk about the African story, which I mentioned, or if we talk about somewhere like Northern Europe, which is growing, which has a growing, what we call a silver economy of people who are older with spending power. So there's significant demographic changes underway globally in the marketplace. Challenges around environmental sustainability, rapid urbanization, inequality, and something that we can't get away from these days, political instability. These are kind of mega things that are driving the creative economy in the background. So bringing this question into the foreground here today in Doha, in Qatar, what do you think is the distinctive value proposition for the creative economy in Qatar? This is something we're going to be exploring with the panel today. What are the stories we need to tell in this country that differentiate, that smartly specialize, but also are relatable and interesting for markets outside of the country? And obviously, there's so much scope, so much to build from. There's so much appetite and there's so much strategic interest in developing this sector. Creativity as an engine for progress in cultural and economic fields. And at a regional level, obviously, other countries are exploring their own pathway here and thinking about what their distinctive value proposition is, what their role is in the global creative economy. But that we need, in order to be able to answer that question about what our distinctive value proposition is in the global creative economy, what the distinctive story for Qatar is, we need to get a grip on the things that are influencing creative practice. And I'm sure that many of the businesses here today, as well as the policymakers, will be thinking about, okay, how do we keep pace with technological change? How do we find a way to get a grip on this marketplace where, if at best, many places feel they're running to stand still? To what extent is the creative and tech sector in Qatar coming together? To what extent are the skill sets being embedded within creative enterprises, whether they be in design or music or fashion or film? Is there a need to not just respond to technological innovation that happens elsewhere, but to drive technological innovation here so you can get ahead of the curve when it comes to thinking about product development, innovation, distribution, and developing markets? And is Qatar transitioning effectively to a multi-platform model for creative goods and services? The idea that there are multiple trajectories for the development and then the presentation, distribution, and the consumption of creative goods and services, where any creative enterprise here will know that their market, their audiences, are also increasingly their collaborators. How are those skill sets emerging in Qatar? And how are we in this country keeping up with the growing reality that what was called a second screen phenomena, the importance of mobile technology, is increasingly becoming this kind of holistic, this holistic context where people are working off multiple platforms through multiple channels, always at the same time, as part of the way they buy things, the part of the way they experience things. And that creates all sorts of hurdles for business development in the creative industries. And I feel that here and in most countries in the world, we're only at the beginning of the process of unwrapping this puzzle, this potential. If we think about the digital transformation that is underway, we're not even inside this yet. We're just tinkering with the cellophane on the edge of the opportunity. We're not there yet. So how do we get into beyond the unwrapping into the heart of the matter when it comes to digital transformation? And this important quote here from a really brilliant report that's just been released called Tomorrow Comes Today, Trends Shaping the Future. Businesses that fail to anticipate trends or delay taking action may find themselves at a permanent disadvantage. Acting early is no guarantee of success, but it is often preferable. So if you think about that on a macro level, to what extent is Qatar acting early? To what extent are the enterprises in this room acting early? And if they're not, then what needs to be done to be able to move quickly enough to ensure that we're not taken by surprise, we don't lose out to market opportunities? Data never sleeps, as you know. There are challenges around access to data. There are challenges around the distribution of data. And there are challenges around data knowledge and data management. So another question really for Qatar is the extent to which there is an aggregation of information, of evidence, of data, and the extent to which businesses here in the creative industries are accessing that and are able to develop their business models based on such data. And to what extent can we be alert to and awake for the opportunities that data is bringing through technological transformation, where obviously we're moving through AI into a totally different landscape when it comes to the significance of data to inform business models. In another sphere, this fudgy graph here just shows us how quickly we're moving in terms of towards VR, AR, immersive technologies, extended reality, which were born in many ways in the film and audiovisual sector, but are increasingly at the heart of the fashion sector, the retail sector around design, where the experience is as important as the product, or the experience that surrounds the product is where the value added lies. And the immersive technologies are driving that transformation when it comes to the creative economy. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the bits of the creative industries which are digitally native. So the gaming industry, moving from the 80s, from the Pac-Man on the left through to where we are now in terms of extended reality and the pervasiveness of gamification across the economy, where even buying a carpet now can be an activity that involves some level of gaming and immersive activity. So how are we supporting our enterprises to explore that reality? And to what extent are games businesses connecting with design businesses, fashion businesses, music businesses to explore the realms of possibility in that environment? What we were going to think about during 2030 is probably going to be true in 2025, said the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella. And wrapped up in this is the point I made earlier on. The individuals, the artists, the designers, the makers. The creative economy depends on them feeling empowered, having access to skills, access to relationships, access to finance, yes. So do we, in the Qatari context, value and respect creative jobs? From your experiences going back to your youth, did you have that sense of empowerment? Do the universities work with industry yet to co-design courses that drive innovation? Is there knowledge exchange, R&D that happens both within education, between education and industry? Is there specialist support available? And how do Qatari creatives collaborate both locally and internationally? And the notion that the marketplace is at once local, regional and global, with a growing middle class all over the world, with digital meaning that you're immediately born global, even if you don't want to be. To what extent are there interesting and new models for export that facilitate enterprises coming out of Qatar to build markets in Europe and internationally? And this is something that we'll be talking about in a moment in the panel. And are there new hybrid models that could be explored, pioneered in the Qatari context, linking, as I mentioned earlier on, the notion of the experience that wraps around the product? Now, there's a geographical question in all this as well. So I mentioned sub-Saharan Africa and how that's growing in terms of its creative economy. This slightly skewy graph here just demonstrates that where the growing market spending power is in the next 30-odd years is in Asia broadly, with Africa just below it, but also there's a cluster of middle income and higher income countries that already have spending power. So the strategic questions for enterprises in Qatar will be about where you go. And to what extent is there a kind of incumbency of spending power that sits within Europe, North America, and the wider Middle East, North Africa region versus those emergent markets in Africa and Asia? And to what extent can you collaborate, perhaps, for example, locally, but also with European companies to build routes to market in those growing regions? And what you do in those markets will be different depending on the demographic change. So as I mentioned earlier, the older people in the north, the global north broadly, with the spending power, the younger people in the global south. And to what extent will the market shift so much that you'll be moving more towards services rather than products in certain parts of the creative economy going forward? And this is something maybe that we kind of learnt a bit about ourselves as a society during the pandemic, is that experiences are actually the thing that matter most. It was culture that we missed. And we're seeing increasingly, I think, with Gen Zers, that they're moving towards upcycling, circular economy. They're not hoarders like the generations that existed before them. The notion of a product, a physical product, has a different cultural value, but the experience and the stories that surround it have perhaps a more profound cultural value. So when we get neighbouring countries like in UAE with their Launchpad platform for developing retail for emergent creative firms, to what extent is there an experience that wraps around that? Can you just sell the products by themselves anymore? What else do you need to do? This is the city of Oulu in the north of Finland, which is actually where Nokia came from, if anyone here is old enough to remember Nokia. They're connecting their cultural landscape to their innovation landscape. And they're thinking about the experiences that are important in terms of building relationships that enable you to get a product to market. So if anyone's feeling brave, every year they have something called polar bear pitching, where they cut a hole in the ice in their harbour, and startups from around the world go to Oulu, and they have to pitch by standing in the ice, in the water, in the harbour, and they can pitch for as long as they can stand it, as long as they can survive the cold. It sounds silly, but actually it's become legendary in startup circles because people are going there for the business-to-business opportunities, but they're going there for the experience and the stories that they can tell about their brand when they go home. So connecting culture and entrepreneurship, product and experience are increasingly important. Or another way of putting it is around the convergence of art, culture and enterprise. And this perhaps for me is one of the most profound things I've read when researching what is happening in Qatar. Revising ourselves through our cultural institutions and cultural development. So embedding or foregrounding art and culture in terms of your economy, in terms of the narrative of the nation state. This is what cities are doing, this is what nations are doing. And giving an equivalence of value to cultural expression, to the intrinsic act of being an artist or a creative, to the economy, to the making money from that art. So this ancient quote from 2010 by the economist John Kay, I think is really important because it suggests that we need a different value proposition for culture and creativity in society. Yes, it's about economic competitiveness. Yes, it's about growth, but underpinned by culture, provenance, authenticity, ethics, sustainability. So somewhere like M7, which is building these roots and becoming a vector for collaboration and innovation, is connecting culture and art and beauty with design, with enterprise, with science. I think this raises some interesting strategic development shifts in terms of thinking around how to marry different bits of a society where historically art was over here and finance and culture and economy were over there. So the notion of the cluster, of cultural placemaking, of connecting assets through infrastructure, through networks, through events, through itineraries is really, really growing across the world. That's Barcelona, Porto, and the notion of playable cities. The city becoming a place for serendipitous, creative activities, a place of art, a place of engagement, and a place of ethics as well. The notion of fashion for good, circular economy, sustainable approaches towards creative industries. And this in itself is becoming more and more profound because of the environmental crisis, but also because we're seeing this movement that connects art and economy all over the world. And we're seeing a movement towards understanding that creative industries is important not just for the economy in terms of jobs and GDP, it's also about GVA and innovation. The spillover or crossover effects. So having a strong creative industry sector in Doha creates a more attractive environment for talent. It makes the city stickier, more resilient, more inspiring. So in a minute when we bring the panel together, we're going to be exploring notions around how you connect enterprise and creativity, how you connect local and global, and how we move across boundaries, how we push across boundaries towards driving innovation in the Qatari creative economy, moving beyond the borders of sectors towards a more holistic approach to the creative industries. The futurist Alvin Toffler said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. This, for me, is the daily existential reality for a creative enterprise. You cannot stand still. You have to unlearn and relearn. And I think increasingly this is the reality for nation states as they try to thrive in this global creative economy. Connecting the dots, joining together, and thinking about how you can both develop your own value proposition but do so collaboratively. So how can Qatar connect with the European Creative Hubs network that is being developed in Europe at the moment? And just to finish then, we're at this turning point, I think, post-COVID, digital transformation, climate crisis, where nations across the world are having to think about how they come out with a fresh, dynamic, compelling value proposition. And we're moving towards what I call the ecosystem model for the creative economy. It connects education and technology, art and science, culture and enterprise, government and civil society, local and global. This, I think, is something we'll be exploring in Qatar as you move towards policy development in the creative economy. So I want to thank you for coming this evening. Now is the best bit, because we're going to go into a panel discussion, and we're going to hear from entrepreneurs themselves about their story in developing their practice, their business in the creative industries in Qatar. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to welcome, if I may, use my notes. I'm going to welcome our esteemed panelists. And my glasses are essential for these tasks. We have three esteemed panelists. I'd like to welcome, if you may, Mr. Ashraf Abu Issa, the chairman of Abu Issa Holding, and I'm sure many of you know him as well. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Ms. Alia Rashid, who's the founder and CEO of From, who's sitting here. And Ms. Sonia Laretz, the co-founder of Revalue. Cheers. Thank you very much. Okay, so this discussion now, this is like a fireside chat. You know, we're going to have an informal conversation, and then we're going to open it up for questions afterwards. And really what we're exploring, that connection between the personal and the strategic. I've asked each of our esteemed panelists to reflect on their own journey and how they are managing that pathway between being creative and running a business, being expressive and thinking about the markets all of the time. So perhaps, Mr. Issa, if you'd like to just kick this conversation off and just reflect on your experience in bridging between the business and the creative aspects.
Good evening, everyone, first. Thank you. And very nice sofas, Ali. And the designer is here, right? She's here. Thank you. Of course, it's always a challenge to have this seamless relationship between the creative industry and the business world. Okay, we need always to have this communication and dialogue, and it's a very dynamic dialogue. It keeps going until we find the right medium, let's say, because it's it's very important that the creative ideas become good business ideas, and business ideas should have creativity too. So both work very well together, but you have to stay true to your artistic dimension, and also you have to make business sense. So this is the challenge always. And working with artists, I had a gallery before, I have an auction house now, and working with artists is always fun because they're really, they think completely outside the box. they give you always new ideas and new dimensions, but also to respect their art and to make business out of it is not an easy challenge. So far in Qatar, for example, in our company, we had the privilege of having the World Cup souvenirs business. We did a big part of that. And we engaged only local designers in that exercise. So for each category that we had around 20 categories, we had designers pitch their designs for the categories that we have. And it was a very, very nice exercise. It was beautiful. Sometimes, some of the designs are not achievable when it comes to manufacturing, and in some ways, maybe sometimes if you want to do it exactly to their design, then it's going to become too expensive. So we said, why don't you just smart engineer it in a way? Let's talk together and let's have a dialogue. And I want something that you approve as an artist. That will also say, and then also from a manufacturing and business side, we have to also look at the cost. And then we always found a good comfort zone for both of us, and it always worked.
Thank you for that. So in a minute, we're going to come back to you just to reflect on the marketplace in Qatar and how you kind of manage the local and the global at the same time. But I'd like to hear from our other panelists as well. And Sonia, perhaps you just could reflect on that personal journey thing about being creative and developing a business at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any wrong or right answer when it comes to creative and business. I think they're most of the time either completely intertwined or they're isolated. I'll illustrate it by giving the example of the artist, a painter. When he paints, he thinks of his art, and he will not think of the business in the sense of how he will sell the piece. He will think of how he will convey his emotions. When it comes to pure business brands, I will take the example of a perfumer or someone that creates these products. He will himself think about how he will convey the message into his creation and his product, building it into how it could be sold in the business. So here we have two business cases where you have the artist and the creativity isolated, and then a business case where both are completely intertwined.
Very interesting.
When it comes to my personal journey, for the past 15 years, I've been building European and American niche luxury brands within the GCC region, which entitles us to constantly intertwine the creative and the business together in order for not only create appetence and need and demand within the domestic or regional market, but also develop and create traffic and interest in all the workforce of the region.
That's a really interesting point, and we're going to come back to this a bit later on, actually, is how you manage that kind of local to regional to global as well, and how you kind of connect those different scales of operation in this context. And I think if we take the case of From, this is one of the things that you're developing in your own work, in the incredible story that is unfolding there.
Yeah,
Alia.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, so from coming from a business background, we saw the gap that's between the creatives and the talented designers and the business world. And this is exactly what From is doing. It's a platform for the young talents to join, and we take them through the full business experience to take them to the local and international markets.
And you're on which floor?
On the fourth floor.
On the fourth floor.
So
if you haven't been, then connect. And perhaps this links in neatly into the next question I wanted to explore with you all, which is Qatar, brilliant though it is, and high spending though it is, we know that, but it still can't get away from the number of people. So how you, in your business, and perhaps we'll go back this way, to kind of manage that. And you've been working obviously in partnership and collaboration with the Italian furniture industry. I'd be interested in how you connect Qatar's strengths to other places to build that marketplace.
So Qatar is full of potential talents, a lot of positive elements from Qatar, with the existence of educational foundation like VCU and creative hubs like what Qatar Museum is doing, M7, Liwan, Fire Station. They're all promoting the creative talents, and what we have in Milan is the excellence of manufacturing, excellence of furniture market in general, and this is what we created from day one, is have a team, an experienced team between Qatar and Milan to give an opportunity and education to the designers to take them through this journey.
So there's a kind of level of co-design, of really genuine
It's all about collaborations, it's all about co-design, co-creating. It's a full design process, starting from the market research to merchandising, to creating the right collections, to taking the designers through the full design journey. Even we take them to the manufacturers for the prototyping phase, which takes place in Qatar, in Milan, in Turkey, and this is part of the education they take as well on the platform, to the point of delivering the final product and collections.
So you think it's absolutely necessary now, if you're a creative working in furniture design or in other design industries, you have to be instinctively international in the way you work from day one?
Definitely not. Definitely it's a plus. It's with a market size like Qatar, definitely you have to look beyond the market, you have to look to the region, and to Europe. But the reason we existed in Milan at the same time is for the expertise as well. So it's a cross-cultural platform. We started off with collaborating with the Qatari designers, and then we expanded into bringing diversity to this platform when we included also the Italian, the Turkish, the Egyptian nationalities on the platform as well.
Thank you. Now, Sonia, you've been working in the region for a number of years. So I think you've got, I'm sure, privileged insights into how the context is changing, and perhaps it'd be interesting to reflect on what you see as some of the changes in terms of that balance again between the regional market or the local market and working out internationally.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what your objective is. If you're looking into building brands in the region, the past 15 years have seen drastic changes in terms of innovations, in terms of international brands that wish to develop and establish themselves across all the GCC. All markets have different prerequisites. So if you want to enter Dubai, there will be some prerequisites, Saudi, Kuwait, or Qatar. Every time it's slightly different, and that's the beauty of the GCC as well. When we look at the evolution, right now the appetence is real in Qatar. There's a platform, there's an existing platform to create opportunities, to open up the market for European companies, brands that wish to establish themselves over here. So I would say that what's interesting is to look at the different platforms that can be created and also merge the knowledge between European and locally what exists, the actual infrastructure that are ready made, the real estate that is ready to welcome people, all these different companies and knowledge that are ready to develop themselves. When it comes to education as well, families can come and start giving a super education to their children, but not only the children, to teenagers and others that want to study. Amazing programs are being proposed to the ones 20 and above. So this means that Qatar is ready to welcome and to also propose a lot of solutions to entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. And I'm going to be asking more questions about this actually a little bit later on, because I think we're getting to the fundamental question here, which is what is the distinctive value proposition? What are the real strengths and qualities that Qatar has? But then we'll also talk about, okay, maybe there's things that we can tweak here. Maybe there's gaps we need to bridge. So just bear those things in mind as we're going to get there. But so as somebody who's obviously been enormously successful in scaling from Qatar, I'll be fascinated by your reflections really on how you get that balance.
Yes, I mean, the world now is becoming smaller. Communication is becoming much more efficient, much faster. Our millennials and Gen Zs in Qatar are global citizens, like most of them in around the world. So really, the world is their borders. There's nobody thinks about their small market anymore. A small market is just a platform. It's a stage for them to launch from. Today, when I talk to the big brand and company owners, and I ask him, I always mean to ask him, what keeps you up at night? And the common answer, I would say, between all of them is that the dilution of their big brands. So the smaller brands, the smaller designers are becoming known now. I mean, we have tools, our social media, the whole dynamics are changing. So they're worried about, they used to be alone, and they used to be the only one who can advertise, because advertising was one page used to pay $500,000 or something. Now, if you have a good influencer, or if you are a good influencer, you can always get your, just for example, you get your brand known, and then it becomes viral, and it takes away some market share from these big brands. So I don't want our size to become an obstacle. I don't want our numbers to become an obstacle. Access to education, access to R&D, that's what we should worry about. Access to capital, we have to refine and maybe improve. Maybe Sheikh Al-Anud can help in this. The VCs, we need more VCs, Sheikh, here under your umbrella. So, angel investment should be a culture among businessmen. Without that, we cannot really launch strong brands and go global. Going global, I think, if you have a good idea, a niche, a business, or something that really solves a problem, then the borders are open. You just have to get the product launched, and then it will take off by itself.
I love that notion that the kind of platform, the local market is the platform to then scale and reach out. And I just wonder, as a follow-up question, do you feel that a couple of things you mentioned there, the access to talent and the R&D, is this something that Qatar can really get ahead of in the context?
Yes, as Alia mentioned, we have VCU, we have now Qatar University is looking more at design and creative education. We have very soon, there will be launched a Qatar Fashion Council, and also Crafts Council. So the intention is there. Sheikh Mayasa is a big advocate of that. M7 is a good example of incubating and scaling businesses, creative businesses. The intention, the strategy is being implemented and being redefined, and we get always this like AI. His Excellency Ambassador Tedor talked about AI. You mentioned AI. It's a disruptive technology that we have to live with, and we have to look at the positive side of it. And I feel it's going to be very positive. I have also my own belief that AI will distribute wealth in a way. Now the future of luxury for me is niche and bespoke, custom made, and all this, personalization. That's going to be the future of luxury, in my opinion. So AI will help in that, and AI will help us overcome some of the obstacles that we always have. So don't look at it as a threat. It's actually an opportunity.
And that's interesting. It depends on who you talk to, whether it's a glass half full or glass half empty take on AI, isn't it?
But you talked about unlearn and relearn.
Yeah.
With AI we have to do that.
Yeah, very much so. And in the notion around personalization, around democratization of content, of production, and I guess that opens up opportunities for a small nation as well, to be the boutique, the niche in the global marketplace.
Why not? You just need the intention from our leadership, and I know it's there. to do it, and we realize now, and Safa, I don't know if she's here anymore, but she was a big advocate of making sure that the stage is ready for creative industries to be established.
No, it's really positive to hear that, and to hear that the creativity and arts and culture are seen as central to innovation and enterprise. So this is music to my ears, obviously, but I think it's really
Yes.
it's actually a profound development for a nation in terms of their creative economy. Now, just Sonia, I mean, you are based in Dubai. Am I allowed to say that? So you have that kind of regional purview, and we're getting into this conversation about what is the value proposition for Qatar. We're not going to solve that in one evening, but what are the kinds of things that you feel are relative strengths that because you're moving around the region and also going back and forth globally?
There are a variety of strengths and opportunities. So let's pick up probably on everything that's possible right now over here. I'm sure that the younger generation has a lot of power right now. Amongst the GCC, they are the empowering generation. And amongst them, there are a lot of designers, talents, and entrepreneurs, and they don't know yet that they want to be an entrepreneur. It's just about triggering the possibility that they could become entrepreneurs. They are already in the GCC. They might mingle around and travel to Qatar if we give them this opportunity too. This is how it all started in the GCC. It's known for that. We are a platform of entrepreneurs. In Europe, it's difficult to be an entrepreneur. We have all of the facilitation when it comes to education, but it's difficult when we're young to become an entrepreneur. So I would say that the strength here is about the opportunity to facilitate the entry of young people that are in Europe to come here and have a future, because it is a dynamic country, because it empowers already all the young generation in the art industry. Look at all of what you've created in terms of buildings and architects that are European, that built amazing museums, buildings. So it means that this cross-polarization exists already, and we need to touch upon it a little bit more. And so this will also welcome enterprises and new brands to settle here.
Very interesting. And just connecting that, joining the dots here, we're from Alia. You're already immersed in this collaboration with creatives in the EU. How do you describe Qatar to the Italians? How do you kind of create that story, that value proposition?
It's simply full of heritage, full of stories, full of young talents. So working with the talents, you can see how giving them the right tools and giving them the right platform can get their expertise and talents out to not just to Qatar, but also to the world. So you're seeing this chair, for example, this is co-designed by Mariam, I think I saw her face here today. And another collection by Hammam, also another designer of ours. So these talents are so passionate and promising to get onboarded on such a platform to take them to the international market, local and international.
And is it as simple as that? Is it just about saying we've got the talent and being confident with what is here, not feeling, you're dealing with the leading city or region of furniture making in the world, with this heritage around furniture innovation and design in Italy, but you can collaborate with them as equals. This is so profound.
Yeah, but so the business side is not as simple as that. The business side is whether it needs all the work, it needs all the networking, the right supply chain, the right manufacturing, the right sales channels, marketing. This is where the challenge is. But we need to create it as a platform and tools for the creative talents, which is one of Qatar's values, I can see, to promote them.
Okay, so you just touched on something there, which is obviously we want to be upbeat, we want to talk about opportunities, but we also need to be pragmatic. And just thinking about that enabling environment, for young creative talent coming into the industry. And when I say young, that can also mean older people who are starting up later in life.
Of course.
They're young businesses.
Yeah.
But also perhaps more established businesses that are having to pivot, to innovate, to change all of the time. For me, from the outside, Qatar seems to have a lot of the enabling conditions that you need to flourish as a creative entrepreneur. But what do you think could be enhanced, or what perhaps hasn't been introduced which might be introduced that can make a difference for people's creative opportunities?
So a lot is taking place on the landscape of the creative economy here in Qatar. So the support of Sheikh Al Mayasa and the infrastructure for the businesses had started, but I see, of course, a lot of potential incentives that can be given to the local businesses that can also encourage the business to grow locally and internationally. So, for example, going to international fairs and being exposed to different cultures would make a big difference as well.
So outward missions as well as bringing, because you mentioned, Sonia, bringing people here, but actually bringing Qataris into their markets and as well seems to be a simple thing. And is it beyond trade shows and events? Is it also about residencies and these kinds of things? So you're both nodding, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, residencies, incubation. I think our biggest support for the creative industry is really the willingness and the determination of our leadership. I see, for example, Sheikh Mayasa knows maybe most of our designers and artists by name, and she follows their journey. You don't find this in many countries. You don't find leaders who are so determined, so down to earth, so humble that will talk and give chances to designers and creative people to really flourish and take care of them and guide them and support them, maybe send them on trips to learn more and everything. We have a good example also. Engineer Brahim Al-Jeda is here. He's a local architect that's done a lot of our landmarks here. He used Qatar as a good platform, and now we have offices around how many countries, Brahim? 4 countries outside, and very successfully, I would say, integrated. These offices work with each other, and it's if he was not so good here, he would not be able to be successful and be there for so long, and be sustainable in these countries. So we have good examples, and I think also another thing, we have to really highlight our champions. We have to highlight our success stories. We have to attract talent, and I think there's a good step towards that. Now there's a visa for talented people, and they don't have to find a sponsor like before and get in that I would say bureaucracy. They can just apply if they're distinguished enough, they can just come in and do business here. So attracting them is something, but retaining them is something else. We have to always build an ecosystem and improve that to make sure that they flourish when they come to Qatar. And once they become a success story, we have to highlight that so we can attract others.
So Qatar, it changes from being a place which is perhaps a meeting point in the arts and creative industries to a place of co-production, co-design, and collaboration.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, definitely. We have a lot to offer in our region, and the Global South in general needs this kind of initiatives and needs a hub for creativity, and not only one, but the region and the South in general needs more than one hub. And there are many ideas where you can complement these industries in a way that's very business sustainable. Why not? I mean, we cannot compete today with the big manufacturers and producing big production of, let's say, fashion. Okay, but we can have studios that can make your samples and your capsule collection that can be the samples that people would buy from, and then you can go to manufacture somewhere else. We can be competitive in that, but not competing with the big. So we have to find our niche. We have to know where we are, and then focus on that.
Yeah. So high value is key as well in that context, because you can't compete on cost. You compete on quality,
exactly.
On innovation,
exactly.
and distinctiveness.
Innovation, exactly.
So I'm going to go round this gorgeous furniture, round the sofa one more time. And this is just kind of reflecting on the bigger picture. And I asked each of our panelists to come up with a couple of take-homes or pointers or tips. One is the kind of take-home for a creative entrepreneur. You know, what are the things to look out for, the things to embrace? And the second is just that reflection again on what we've been talking about for Qatar. What can Qatar become as a creative nation? I don't want to put anyone on the spot because it kind of sets the tone of the conversation. So who wants to pick up the mic first? Sonia, thank you so much. It's the number $1 million question.
Okay, so Qatar can totally become a startup nation. And this could be a leading vision coming from the bottom down to mobilize all the generation to come about the possibilities. The key takeaways, because there are many creative talents, whatever the industry, at the end of the day, we're all creatives. So I would say that they need to have a very clear vision on their project. If it's not clear, it's extremely difficult to be able to explain it. So a clear vision and a clear business plan. And the business plan sometimes can be required, support towards a consultant or an expert. And after that, to build the value proposition and the ecosystem, you need to identify your sustainable partners. So your financial partners, your branding, communication partners, your distribution partners, because with all of these, you will give sustainability to your project, and you will make it, you will give it sense amongst the audience. You will have your buyer personas, and you will create appetence in the market as well. Before anything, you need to study your market, because your project is going to work only if you find differentiation and you create a project where you see there is a need. So you were mentioning the new niche, and this is niche, and niche is available in amongst all industries.
And I think it does very much chime with that point about recognizing and validating your creatives, the artists. It's the people who are making the things, designing the things, telling the stories that create that. It's not a brand, is it? The brand kind of amplifies their creative work.
The brand amplifies. You have many layers within the brand. There's not only the brand. There are the founders, and the founders, whenever you build a brand, you need to ensure that the founders have an expertise. This is also why you are going to convey content, and you are going to nurture the market with new insights, because the talent himself has something to say, because he's either a 7th generation perfumer or an international designer. This is what we want in any market, to be able to be nurtured and learn and grow. And it all comes down to knowledge at the end of the day. So it's not only the brands, it's going to be all the value chain that is going to nurture the project itself.
Yeah, hence the word ecosystem, which maybe is used too many times, but it is an ecosystem, isn't it? It is, fundamentally. Alia, what do you think then we should be emphasizing for budding creatives, but also this creative nation, this nation of startups, if I may?
Yeah, well, it's true. So there is a lot of potential coming out of Qatar, of course, and as a founder, a business owner, and someone who's contributing to the creative economy, I would say be open for opportunities, be open for collaborations, and giving a chance for the talents to play part in the business world as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think the stars are aligning here, because we're saying quite similar things. I don't know if that's because my questions were too closed, but we're certainly talking about being talent central. We're talking about validating talent, being open, supporting startups. What have we missed?
Yeah. Not much. They covered everything. But I would say 3 things. And like Sonia said, I think you have to analyze the market very well and to see where you can fit. You know, Qatar Airways flies to more than 100 destinations. Fly them. Go visit the markets and see why somebody in Japan would buy your product, or somebody in Scandinavia or anywhere. why would they come and buy your product? Because today you cannot think local. You have maybe act local and start local, but you have to think global. And so find your niche, find your idea, find your unique value proposition. The second thing is for the creative people to surround themselves with business-minded people. You know, you always have to make sense of whatever idea you're thinking. It has to have numbers attached to it. It has to have marketability. It has to have so much attached to it. So surround yourself with people like that. I know sometimes this relationship is boring because you don't have the same topics, but it's important. The third thing is that we should embrace artificial intelligence, all of us, you know, and to see where that's taking us. Today, to draft or to, you know, a lot of applications can do that. You know, a lot of can help you design stuff. And if you're not a brilliant designer, just an average one, you can become brilliant. And if you're not even a designer, you can become something. So AI is very important to understand what is the dynamics, how this is going to affect our market. Yes, some jobs will be eliminated, but new jobs will be created for sure. So we have to keep an eye on that.
That's really interesting. And again, it's if you don't eat the AI will eat you.
Exactly.
So we've got to be proactive on
exactly.
that basis. I'm going to open this up, if I may. We have been, I'm going to stand up so I can see you all and stretch my legs. We've been talking, obviously, about the individual and trying to connect that to the nation. I'd just be interested in your reflections, or if you have any questions to our esteemed panelists about, you know, what journey are we on here? What trajectory are we on in terms of the creative economy in Qatar? And are there things you want to know more about? Are there topics we haven't discussed? What would you emphasize as creatives, as agents of change? Don't be shy. And we have a roaming mic, I hope.
Thank you so much. This is really enlightening. I mean, it's shedding the focusing on things that are really important, and majority of our younger generation are into the design industry. I've seen the industry evolve. Next week is 25th anniversary for VCU, and that was the seed that has started this creativity industry here. Before that, there was no local interior designers or graphic designers or fashion designers. Now we have a generation of leaders within their own sectors. The question is actually to you. Now, this 2 decades later, we have so many designers. We have a government that is giving support to almost spoiling the designers with all these facilities. I mean, like Ashraf said, the policymakers know people by name. You as an advisor, you advise nations. Is there such a thing as a design policy? Because you want all these talents to be guided to create something with the potential of adding value not locally but globally. What sort of policies eventually do you after you conclude your advice? I don't want like a conclusion as a consultant, but eventually it's going to go down to policies of the policymakers. How would you put such a thing together if you conclude all what you've seen and heard?
Are you suggesting that you've moved so fast that you almost don't need a policy because you can see the success of?
No, we have so much talent, but I'm sure a lot of this talent is going to waste. Exploring, they need guidelines, they need to be guided. We need to create an industry. A lot of our ministries are big consumers, whether it's a simple paintings on the wall in their buildings or creating tiles or fabrics. Do we create a policy to where this industry can thrive locally, and of course, if it works locally, it will work regionally and then globally?
Obviously, I'm going to say yes, but I think the reason I would say yes is that although you have all of this talent coming into the marketplace now after that 25 years of development, it's not being optimized as it could be because you have the whole world out there. So it sounds like a lot of people. You might think, oh, that's oversupply, but it's not. It's undersupply. because these are talented, gifted individuals who could be developing products and services that are exportable, but also they can bring in people to the country through the collaborations that they wield. I mean, there's a really important subtext in what you said about the kind of infrastructure, there's almost a school of thinking in Europe historically, which is that the great art happens under duress. You know, the artists have to struggle for their livelihood. They have to. That's where the magic happens. If they're not suffering, then the great art doesn't come through. But I think we've moved on from that and recognizing that there are essential, fundamental elements that are necessary for talent to thrive. UNESCO describes this as the status of the artist, and a nation that validates and supports the status of the artist is a nation that broadly will succeed across different levels in terms of its economy, in terms of its civil society, in terms of its soft power. Now this is where policy comes in, because the policy here can be impactful by supporting that talent base to be impactful across those different areas. So if you have lots and lots of designers or people schooled in design, they don't all become designers. You can have an oversupply of SMEs or micro enterprises in design. But if you can embed those people with those disciplines and skill sets in the public sector, in different private sector industries, in tourism, in the heritage sector to reimagine the heritage assets, then you're actually utilizing that investment and that human capital across a whole range of different strategic agendas. So that's, I think, where policy can unlock that. If you just look at it as education policy and economic policy, you're not doing enough, because you also need to think of it as cultural policy, environmental policy, health and well-being policy. And that's where the design can be impactful across Qatar in a more holistic way. So that's the policy solution that would, for me, describe success for somewhere like Qatar. Okay, thank you. Okay, any more hands? Oh, yes, please, sir. Got it?
Yes, good evening. I'm Kimo Laaksonen from the Finnish Embassy here in Doha, and I'd like to give a comment on the issue of creativity against the profitability or this. And in Finland, we, some 15 years ago, decided to go through the education. Like most of the things in Finland, we go through the education, and we combined the University of Technology in Helsinki with the School of Economics and University of Arts, so that the students can produce something technologically advanced, which is also sellable and even looks good. So that was the Finnish solution. Thank you.
I'm so pleased that you're here, because I often present Finland as a best practice example within a European context. And the pioneers as well in STEAM. I'm sure you probably talk about STEAM here, you know, the STEM with the arts in the middle. And that's embedded in the Finnish education sector, which is really fundamental to creativity across society, which we just talked about in the last observation. And Oulu, I mentioned Oulu, which is continually reinventing itself and will be European Capital of Culture in 2026. So get your coats on and go to Oulu.
I used to live in Oulu for a period.
Yeah. Oh,
then I moved south.
Yeah, the winter. You have the dark winter and the light winter. I learned when I was working in Oulu. Winter a lot. Please.
So what we do at M7 is we work with a lot of public and private sector companies where we offer designers with the opportunities to provide these services, because we see ourselves as a connector and as a vessel. So we do that, and we think that has helped greatly. And instead of having an overflow of SMEs that everyone wants to be a designer that owns their own company, we're trying to also advance people's knowledge with the understanding of you can be integrated into different companies. You can work with from what Alia is doing at M7. You can work with Cutting Studios downstairs, who's Qad al-Sabi'i. We don't need excess SMEs. What we need is collaboration and just excess of that.
Exactly. And I think you mentioned a point, creatives and management,
Yes.
And this is, I think, a similar point, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It's a good example of how that would contribute to the ecosystem of fashion designers. Every time I pass by there, it's always busy, always dynamic, a lot of workshops, a lot of new designers coming and trying to get their things done over there. That's very nice. But I also want to highlight that the creativity is not only, I've been talking about fashion and design, but it's music, it's film, it's architecture, it's many things. So, and all of it will contribute, and all of it will complement each other. So you need those, you know, for example, somebody was telling me, I think Safa yesterday was telling me about how Hollywood helped the establishment of the Silicon Valley. And there's actually a scientific proof of that. You know, everything has to really work together, and there has to be a complete atmosphere.
Yeah, I think it's true, and a lot of the kind of unicorns or the breakthroughs come through that kind of cross-sector passing of different sectors coming together. It's fundamental, and if you can nurture that, and I think M7 is doing that, because you'll kind of be this broker, this hub across the boundaries of different creative sectors and into the wider society. It's really, really key. Any other questions, or we'd love to hear from your own stories as well, please.
Hi, I'm Hammam Al Abdullah. I'm from designer as well. So one of the challenges so basically as a creative person, and I went into interior design, so coming back, there was a lot of that was covered today, like how, you know, being empowered and having, you know, the platform. So that was very stressful, trying to come back here after my studies in the US. So I was trying to see, okay, so how am I gonna make it in the local, you know, economy and industry? So having, you know, creative opportunities and platforms like really have, you know, given the voice to the creatives, you know, here, like when they incubate and, you know, they teach them, and how, you know, give them also the voice and the, you know, the exposure, so that they can, you know, reach locally and internationally. So also, like, you know, being part of QM as well, like being integrated as a designer in a company, like you're saying. The thing is about being, you know, attracting and retaining designers does, I feel, impact some policy in a way, because like, you know, a lot of our parents from different generations, they would think about, no, you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer, and because that would be, you know, more profitable in a way. But I feel there should be some, you know, standardization of, you know, how, you know, to attract the designers to be well compensated, even within like these, you know, for example, as a government company as well. But having also to work with you know, we get to expand on our, you know, skill set, and also with Qatar Museums as well, because Qatar Museums here is the main driver, you know, for creatives and designers. A lot of them coming out from VCU. So basically, you know, they are the ones that will take in these talents, and I feel like their focus, but this is the platform here, you know, this is M7, like this is a very important a conversation to really engage with. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to address that, because you're absolutely right. We do struggle, especially when dealing with, you know, international companies, when they're looking to add a little bit of culture and representation in their work, and they approach us to find a designer, a graphic designer, interior designer to work with them. They usually think that promotion is enough for the designers, and compensation is something that we negotiate on behalf of the designers. So that is something that, as M7, yes, we are doing, but policy should be put in place for things like that, and I agree with you 100%.
Now, this is really important, and it does link to that status point as well, and formalizing the sector and validating the sector, and recognizing that it's not just the product, it's also the preparation. And there's a lot of time that goes into a lot of things that we almost take for granted in terms of creative products and services these days. One more question. Okay. And how are we for time, by the way?
Creative people do not have a good return on investment, they will die with time. So they will fade. I mean, so what I mean here, that they need support to have a good ROI to be sustainable. Otherwise, they will die. So, and this is the role of the big businessman in the country, the role of the government to take their hand and push them to go forward. Thank you very much.
It's a really important point, and we mustn't neglect this. Access to finance, investment readiness, and having tangible returns on investment for different kinds of money. And I just wonder, you're nodding enthusiastically now, perhaps you could reflect on that. How do we almost kind of co-design our ROIs for the creative industries in Qatar?
Just introducing more financial literacy to designers and creative people. As I mentioned earlier, it's always a challenge, but we have to always stay true to our art. You know, this is we should not forget, and we should not. I encourage creative people to stick to their to their core value as an artist, and not to dilute that or to compromise so much for the profit making. Even though I'm more a businessman than anything else, but I still find the more you show your art, the more sellable even the item is. But yeah, you're right. They should have an ROI somehow.
Yeah. And this is something we find in lots of places. And part of the challenge is I mentioned around data and evidence, and building a robust set of case studies so that an investor would actually have confidence on the likelihood of certain types of ROI. That kind of asymmetry is so profound in the creative industries, which is a real challenge.
But I'd like to add also one thing, I think, to Hamad Abdullah? Hammam. Yes, Hammam. Said something about the parents and what they expect from their children. There's something here we have, I don't know if you know Junior Achievement in America. The Arabic version of that is called Injaz. And Injaz was established here about 15 years ago. I was one of the founding board members. And I remember talking to parents. It was so hard to convince them that their children should not go into, like we try to encourage it. Look, your child is very artistic, he's very creative. Let him start doing some film or some. The resistance was very high. In 10 years, let's say, only in 10 years, changed completely. Actually, they're saying, okay, we want him to become a filmmaker or a musician. How can we do that? How can he help us do that? In 10 years, it was a complete shift of mindset. And that's thanks to our leadership, because also, the exhibitions we had, the kind of people, Damien Hirst, Jeff Koons. All these artists came here and exhibited with big exhibitions, and in the beginning it was shocking to the public, some of the things we saw. But now it's like they're getting used to it, and that's actually the first. I remember there was a lot of arguments about many of the arts, and all of you witnessed that. Now it's actually more accepted, more digested, and that's really helping a lot. And actually it was a leap more than just progress.
Yeah. And that's another example of what policy can do as well for the sector in terms of validating it. I saw a hand up here, in the middle.
Yes, hi. I would just like to mention something, and being a designer myself, I think something that we really need in our region, in general, in the Arab region, is a bit more understanding towards the creatives, talking again about fashion. Because of globalization, we are compared as local designers, as regional designers, we are compared with our international peers, which is very unfair towards designers like us, because we come from a region where the fashion industry is literally just now happening. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the support. We're starting to get support, but we're way behind in comparison to our peers. There's something that I feel as designers, as creatives, we're always facing is judgment and from people who are investors or are people who are supporting us financially. This is a business with very low ROI, especially like when you're starting, your return on investment is very minimal. And then coming from this region, it's a lot more harsh. And I feel like people with money in this region are still not understanding enough, and they put a lot of pressure on the designers. That's why you were also finding a lot of designers very like either misled or they're just lost. If they feel that they're not making returns within the first year, they feel like, oh, we're failures, and then literally everything goes down the drain. So I feel this is something that we really need also to create awareness about. Like, just there's no such thing as spoiling. Like, nobody is spoiled because there's a lot missing in our region. So yeah, that's it.
Perhaps, Alia, you'd like to reflect on that, because building that community, trying to invest it with confidence is part of what you're doing in the furniture sector, but obviously there are parallels to what we've just heard.
So yeah, exactly, from my experience or from what we're doing is giving the support for the creative or for the artist or designer to onboard with a different model of ROI. So the ROI in my case, is a different model for the designer, because the business as a whole, is taken care of by the private investor, and having a designer, for example, like what happened with Mariam and Shoa, the designers for our first collection, they got on board in terms of the co-education, co-design, and they also get on board in the profit making of the furniture when we sell. So they do get through the full percentage of the selling as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I think this is, what you described there is obviously common globally, but perhaps it's more of a challenge here because, as you say, it's a young sector. But maybe reframing it, you're way behind on one level, but you're actually way ahead on another level, because of this freshness and this proximity to other sectors could be really opportune. Because in other parts of the world, the fashion sector sort of sits outside of other creative sectors too much. So they don't have that collaborative opportunity. So maybe there's a way of turning what you said into a bit of a strength. Easier said than done, but it could be something to explore. And the fashion designers are also artists as well, and that's another thing to explore. They can be validated in different ways, because otherwise that whole access to finance for fashion designers who are working seasonally, they don't earn anything until the collection's out, and then they have to cross their fingers that they will sell. That requires different kinds of money as well, and different kinds of ROI. But if you think of them as artists as well, then there's different income streams they could generate as part of that process. So.
Can I add something?
Of course you can.
I was thinking, according to what you just said, a really great best practice that occurred was the Fashion Trust Arabia last year. And putting Qatar on the global map when it comes to fashion, the more often you will do it, the more the perception will change towards the young generation and you as designers. Probably because it's still a small market and it's still beginning and you're young creators, so we have that perception outside of the country. But the more we will do cross alliances and fashion events on the global map as big as Fashion Trust Arabia, the perception will change and you'll get more and more support. And you have Alia and other platforms here to support that. So it's ultimately going to support the growth.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else got any questions or observations? Want to plug something you're doing? Use this platform? Okay. Well, I want to, first of all, just thank the panelists, my esteemed panelists. It's been brilliant to meet you and to engage with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
I want to once again thank M7 for hosting us, being that connector, that platform. So important. Thank you. I obviously want to thank our colleagues, the EU delegation, to the GCC, Ambassador and the whole team. Thank you so much for bringing this together, and long may it continue. And let's hope this is the beginning of a set of relationships through the creative industries between the EU and Qatar. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the talented people from different sectors who have come here this evening. Thanks so much for giving up your time. Stay connected. There's going to be some networking now, so please hang around if you can. Great to see you. And if I may say so, make sure you get more out of these panelists. Come and talk to them, ask some more questions that you didn't have the chance to ask. And over to you, sir, for the final words.
I'd like, ladies and gentlemen, to thank you very much for being with us. And as we conclude this enriching discussion, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, panelists, and of course our attentive audience. A specific acknowledgement is in order for our key presenter and speaker, Dr. Tom Fleming, whose expertise significantly elevated the quality of our discourse today. His insights have been nothing short of enlightening and undoubtedly guide our future endeavors in the creative economy. I would also like to extend a sincere thank you to the EU-GCC Dialogue in Economic Diversification Project, and more specifically Rania, the events and communication expert, for her invaluable support in organizing these events, and of course to M7 for providing us with the ideal platform for such groundbreaking conversations. Kindly note that Rania is preparing already a full detailed event report, including Dr. Fleming's presentation and videos, which will be shared with you in due course. Today's focus on identifying effective models for monetizing creative outputs, exploring diversified market entry strategies, and understanding European investment opportunities have been invaluable. These dialogues are not just timely, but set the stage for a vibrant future, catalyzing change, sparking innovation, and advancing us closer to realizing Qatar's creative and economic potential. M7 will continue, we hope, to serve as an integral part of this joint journey. Stay tuned for upcoming initiatives, mentorship programs, and events designed to reinforce our collective aims in creative sectors, as we have an ambitious program of collaboration for next month and the year to come. Thank you all for your remarkable contributions. Together, we're not just keeping the momentum alive, but accelerating it, shaping a future where the creative economy is not an abstract idea, but a tangible, thriving reality. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you first of all for having me on this session today. It's a great opportunity for me to tell the story of From and the contribution that we are doing for the creative economy and working with the local talents to promote them locally and globally. Yeah.
I would like first to thank the delegation of the EU, headed by His Excellency Ambassador Tudor, who's a very good friend of the country and of us as business community. This is a great opportunity to speak about the creative industries, because nowadays, for a small country like us in Qatar, creative industries will give us a big opportunity to export our knowledge, our designs, our music, our film, in a way which is seamless. Smaller countries has less chance with manufacturing and hardcore industries, where we have a better chance of raising a generation of creatives that can not only serve the market, but also export their talent and the creativity to the rest of the world. So this comes at a very, very important time, especially with the introduction of artificial intelligence, where you have to embrace it rather than wait for it to eliminate jobs or disrupt business. The part of that movement, and thanks to the European Union delegation for this beautiful gathering.
It's an honor to be here in Qatar today. The future is creative for Qatar. You have the talent, you have the infrastructure, you have the vision, you have the ambition. Pull it all together, you can be a creative nation on a global level. And with the EU being central to collaboration and partnership and exchange going forward.
First of all, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be part of the panelists, and I want to thank the EU and M7 for welcoming us today. I think there are a lot of opportunities. Qatar is, I would say, completely ready to welcome a lot of people and creatives and entrepreneurs to even build further Qatar as a startup nation. So today was very interesting as we had a lot of artists and creatives already here eager to learn, listen to insights. So it shows the interest and the fact that Qatar is already an incubator platform, ready to welcome and work around both local expertise and European expertise, and by linking them together, making a nation that's even stronger and creative. So thank you.